Hi guys, Terry here with another video, and I have to share my thoughts on this book. Anne Rice's Blood Communion is the new Prince Lestat book. It is I think the 15th, give or take, book in the Vampire Chronicles. I pre-ordered it, I got it, I've read it, I fucking loved it. Genuinely. I don't know how other fans feel about the book. I actually haven't looked at what anybody else has thought. I haven't read spoilers or anything like that. I actually went into this book 100% spoiler free, no discourse whatsoever. I haven't sought out, and I gotta say, I fucking loved it. All the characters were super on point, and this is one of the shorter books in the series. I can't remember, but I think on average there's about 300 pages or so, I think, roughly. But a lot of the other books are 400, 500. I think Queen of the Damned is way more. But yeah, this is a shorter book in the series. It's one of the first, I think it is the first to have illustrations, and I really enjoyed them. What I really liked about them is that they were simple, pen and ink, just black sketched illustrations. So they were very simple, clean, basic stuff, mostly of scenery. I will say I really was nervous that they were going to include illustrations of the characters. Now, for me personally, I don't mind illustrations, but what I liked is that these kind of felt like Harry Potter. You know how in Harry Potter, where the only real illustrations you see in the original books are just at the chapter openings and stuff? That's kind of what this was. There was only a handful of illustrations that would occasionally pop up, and it was of something that's relevant to whatever chapter you happened to be reading, but there weren't a lot of them, and there was no character interpretation drawn into there, because for me, I think that would have distracted, because I have my own image of what everybody looks like, and while I do like fan art, for example, I'm not necessarily looking for, because I don't like the comic books interpretations of a lot of the characters. I just don't. So I'm kind of glad that they didn't include any artistic interpretation of what the characters looked like. They just kept it basic. So yeah. They also, when I first got the book, I made a video where I was like, I'm super excited about this book, and you have to look at this illustration. They had a whole illustration on the inside of the covers of the chateau in which Lestat holds his court, and it's beautiful. But yeah. So I really liked this book. It was shorter. It flowed very, very well. Okay, this was a book that felt very much like a return to form. There was still purple prose, and almost at the drop of a hat, Lestat is describing what somebody looks like or what they're wearing. If shit's going down, he still has to describe what they're wearing. That's just Lestat's thing. He always has to describe what people look like, what they're wearing. He's really obsessed with the clothes and the like. But I really, really liked it. In general, that it kind of had that same, and my phone just went off. It had that same flair, that same basicness, and it still had that style, that purple prosy style that we're used to, but it was more streamlined. It was more to the point. The first part, the first couple of chapters basically felt like an introduction, catching people up as a refresher course for old readers, and it kind of felt like it was trying to, if you're just picking this book up right away, it's trying to help give you an idea of what you're getting into. If you're reading this book, I don't see why you would be reading this book if you haven't been reading the books all along, because it's kind of a pointless thing, in my opinion. Because this book is very much, for me personally, it feels like it's the end. And I'm kind of hoping that it is. Genuinely. Some people might disagree with me on this, but the way the story unfolds, it unfolds so organically, so nicely, that
it comes to such a happy ending that I don't want it to continue beyond this point. I feel like whatever's been said has been said, and there's no need to go back into this universe anymore. Not because I don't love these characters. I adore these characters. I love these books. I want to get a tattoo of Louis, which I will get to in a bit. I have to mention Louis. But it felt so good to get to that ending after all the trials and tribulations. It just felt complete. So what is the story? Well, basically, it's a vampire civil war of sorts. It's mainly just like one guy that's opposing the court. You see, in this universe, vampires have mainly lived in like isolation from the world, from each other. They're very territorial. They tend to establish like a place to live, and that's all they want. They want their own little slice of heaven. They don't want to be interfered with. They kill each other over territorial disputes, and they basically want to be left the fuck alone. And that's how it's been for millennia. And sure, the odd coven will occasionally pop up, like Night Island, for example, popped up after Queen of the Damned, you know, but that disbanded. There was Lestat and Louis' family with Claudia that lasted like 50, 60 years. That eventually fell apart. And then there's the Children of Satan. That eventually falls apart. So basically, it's a trend that vampires, it's always like that thing, is that vampires can't seem to really live together. They're very independent and very territorial, and they live such long lives that it's very difficult for them to live together, to confine themselves to a place. But this is after so much shit has happened. Everything from like the Queen of the Damned stuff, the Tale of the Body Thief, Memnoch the Devil, all of this stuff has been happening. And all of these vampires have been reading everything. Not to mention, there's been like 2 great burnings. First with Akasha, who did a huge purge, getting rid of countless amounts of ancients and young ones alike, burning down entire coven houses. And then there was a Mel in Prince Lestat that destroyed so many more vampires. So basically, the number eventually got whittled down to only about 4,000 vampires. I was going to say people. So now, it's kind of different, because now it's mostly young vampires. Like, there was only a handful of ancients left and a handful of old ones that managed to, not ancients, but old ones, that managed to survive. They started making people. They started making fledglings, but they're all so young. There's not many really old vampires anymore. And that these guys have a different perspective on that. They want safety, they want security, they want a family. Like, they're still very close, I guess, quotes, to their mortal lives, and they kind of want that sense of security, especially most of them lost their makers or their companions in the Great Burnings. So there's a big reason why the court is now becoming such a success, especially with Lestat as the figurehead, because Lestat has established himself, even with all his fuck-ups, has established himself as this kind of hero who, while he fucks up a lot, and he's selfish a lot of the time, he, at his core, wants good things to happen, especially for his own kind. So he's now really pushed into doing this, and he wants to make a court that's everlasting, that has rules, that has restrictions. And there's this other vampire, Rosh. I can't pronounce his name, but we're going to call him Rosh because that's his nickname. Now, Rosh, if you haven't read the books, but you probably have if you're watching this video, but Rosh had killed an ancient, a very powerful ancient. He did a lot of fucked up stuff. And everybody wants him dead. Everybody wants him dead. Except for Lestat. Lestat is showing him mercy because he understands why Rosh did what he did. Because Rosh was under the influence of something more powerful than himself that compelled him to do the horrible deeds like killing Maharet. Well, Rosh now is kind of going insane. He's felt humiliated. He's felt stressed, and he also feels that the court is kind of an abomination to everything that vampires stand for, which I kind of think is fair-ish if you're a vampire. I can see why certain vampires would be very resilient to the court. But here's the thing. The court doesn't say you have to join. All they will do is protect their members. You do not have to join. You can live your life as you please. But if you choose to join the court, or you're attacking somebody in the court, they're going to act. They're going to act on that. So they'll give you warnings, too. They're not just going to up and kill you. Especially if you're not a part of the court. They'll give you warnings. But they're also strict about what they want. And Rosh, I should say, not only was he humiliated by Lestat, who had, like, hurt him and commanded him and all kinds of other things in the previous book, his lover, Benedict, had come to the court, and killed himself in a grand vampire spectacle. Something that the used to do when they just had enough. They would kill themselves and allow, like, the young ones to drink their blood and then have their bodies cut up into pieces and burnt, right? That was it, and it's a whole ritual. Now, Benedict actually helped Rosh with some of his goings-ons in the previous books, and he's felt guilty ever since. And he also finds he can't really live with Rosh anymore. Not because he doesn't love him, because I think he does love him. But he's decided, you know what, I have to. I can't stay anymore. I feel guilt for what I've done. And Rosh is not coming around to my side. Here's your warning. And I'm just going to kill myself. And he does that. And now Rosh comes. And Rosh had followed after Benedict. And he sees that Rosh is dead. So now he's super fucking pissed. Especially at Lestat. He blames Lestat for everything. Not only that, he doesn't approve of the court, even though he has, like, this live and let live policy, supposedly. He doesn't. He's supposed to, like, we'll leave you the fuck alone if you leave us alone. But he doesn't do that, obviously. He shows up, he sees Benedict is dead, he fucking freaks out, and then he starts snagging Lestat's fledglings. He starts going one, collecting people that are close to Lestat. And it's very, very unnerving. I've been reading these books since I was about 13, 14 years old. I'm 29 now. That's a long time to have been reading these books. And you guys know, if you've seen some of my previous videos on the subject, then you know that Louis is my favorite character. Louis de Pontelac, he was the main character of Interview with the Vampire, and he is in this book. Now, because Rosh is trying to get revenge on Lestat, and he's very, very, very powerful, it's very difficult for Lestat. He's trying to get revenge on Lestat, and it's very difficult for Lestat or any of the court to really combat him because he's that fucking powerful. I mean, he is that fucking powerful. He's from, like, the first brood of vampires, or close to that first brood. So he's very, very powerful. He uses his powers unabashedly, and he starts stealing all these fledglings. He starts kidnapping, like, Gabrielle, Lestat's very first fledgling. He kidnaps her. And he sends back a box of ashes with her hair, and at first that's like, what? But Gabrielle is not my favorite. But then he takes Louis. And here's the thing. I was reading the book at my work. I read a half hour a day when I'm at my work, on my break. And I got to that point, and I felt so, when he took Louis, I got to that point where I was like, I was so genuinely upset, and I didn't want to continue reading. I genuinely didn't want to continue reading, because I wasn't sure what was going to happen. And it hurt so much, and it felt so sickening to me that I nearly started crying at work, because, this is a character I adore. This is a character I love so fucking much. And I had no ability, because right when I got to that point where he was taken, I had no ability to continue on, to see, is he going to be rescued? Is everything going to be okay? I cannot fathom these books without Louis being in there. I need to at least imagine that Louis goes on, right?
So it took a couple of days, and it took a day and a half or so before I was encouraged by some of my friends on Tumblr to continue reading. And I did, and it got to the point where Louis' ashes are sent back to Lestat. And what makes it worse is that at my work, nobody really is a reader. Nobody really, and even if they are, they don't necessarily read what I read. And maybe they're not as into it as I am. I get very involved with my reading, and I get very involved with my content, and I think very critically, and I get very emotionally invested in what I am. So for me, it was genuinely, as dramatic as it sounds, it genuinely felt like I was shutting down a little bit inside when I thought Louis was dead. And it turns out he was not dead. It's all a big ruse, because Rosh wanted to get Lestat in a vulnerable position, basically being like, you've seen how powerful I am, and I will continue killing all those that you love if you do not come with me willingly. So he can wreak his vengeance upon Lestat, and so forth. And he comes in and he just starts blasting the chateau with his mind, just everything. And it's super intense. That's a big thing, too, about the Civil War, is it's just one vampire. It's just Rosh who's really, really doing all of this. Now, there is this other vampire, Bodwin, who features there and who does launch some attacks, but for the most part, he's very ineffectual. He doesn't really do anything, aside from maybe one or two little attacks. That's it. He doesn't really do anything, and he is not involved with Rosh. But, anyway. So it turns out that Rosh had used their deaths to shake Lestat up, and he was planning to kill Lestat, and then he would have Gabrielle, Louis, and Marius, because he does kidnap Marius at some point, and he plans to use them as bargaining chips so he can get all his property back, he can get left alone, etc., because once this conflict started, it basically became a war between the court and him. And it's pretty fucking intense when countless other vampires cannot combat this one guy. Now, eventually, Lestat does kill him. He does kill him. He's been holding out and holding out. And one of the reasons he's been holding out is because he doesn't feel he has the right to extinguish a life that has been around for so long. That's number one. He has this respect for Rosh. Number two, he understood why Rosh killed Maharet, because he was under the influence of a Mel who was pressuring him, pushing him to doing it. Thirdly, he also was aware that Maharet had planned to kill all of the vampires by throwing herself and her sister. At the time, Makare, Maharet's sister, had the core, which kept vampires alive. Maharet was planning to kill her and her sister so as to kill all vampires, and Rosh did not want that to happen, so he was trying to take the core from Makare into himself. That didn't happen, obviously. The core ended up going into Lestat. But anyway, so it's a very tangled web. It rewards readers for having read all the other material, including the Prince Lestat books, and it acknowledges all of the stuff, basically. For the most part, it acknowledges all of the canon. If it addresses stuff that happened in, like, the side books, like the tie-in crossover books, like Merrick, Blackwood Farm. I have not read those ones yet. I'm still working on getting through all of the books, but I don't know if those are still canon or not canon. I have no idea. So, as I'm reading, not only was that, like, the death of Louis super fucking intense. Now, obviously, he's not dead, so I was much relieved. But everything was very on point. All of the characters were super in character, and almost every character, new and old, was there. If not directly speaking, they were referenced. That's important, because, again, I feel that this book is the ending. I genuinely feel that the series could end right here and now. It does not need to continue on. And I honestly think it's very well done.
Everybody gets addressed. The court is up. Everything is opulent and beautiful and gorgeous, and everything gets settled. Rosh is dead. All threats are... Whoop. Oops. Sorry about that. All things are golden. And it ends on this happy, beautiful note. Louis and Lestat share a dance. Everything's fantastic. So, you know, it's very, very well written. It's very intense. Everything gets addressed. All plot points are answered. It's so fucking good. It addresses the idea of the vampire court and its authority. It establishes what its rules are, how it will operate. It withdraws from mortal society, so the vampires are focused solely on being amongst their own kind, and they only are feeding on evildoers. People with the mind gift are going out, collecting evil human beings, like human traffickers, like really scummy, evil people from all over the world, and they're filling up the cells of the chateau with these human beings to feed on. These are scummy, evil fucking people. So that's who they feed on. They don't feed on innocents. There's a lot of questions. There's not so much the struggle of good and evil in this one. I also really, really like that they address that they are human beings. Vampires are still human beings. They're just human beings with quirks. And I really liked that they addressed that. I really enjoyed that they addressed that. That was very good because it addresses their emotional aspects while they're reconciling their vampire nature. They have vampire nature. They have their own set of rules, and they have to figure out how to make all of that work, their natural instincts as predators and territorial beings, and how to make that work within their court. And they do it so well. It's just, I don't know exactly what else to say. It's well paced. It's not overly long and dramatic, but it's dramatic when it needs to be, and there's a very real tension and a very real threat that's in there that I really appreciate. You feel the weight of everything that's going on every character. And like I said, there's so many wonderful characters. Armand gets such juicy screen time that it's just fantastic. It's fantastic. Because Armand is not my favorite character, but he's a really cool character. I've learned to appreciate him over time. It's just so well written. It's so good, guys. Honestly. It's just fantastic. So those are just my raw thoughts, the rawest of the raw thoughts on this book. And I highly encourage you, if you haven't read any of the Vampire Chronicles series, you should. It's good. It is fantastic. It is golden. And this book in particular, if this is the last book, which I'm kind of hoping it is, if this is the last book, this has been really, really good. It's a good, happy, solid ending. It's fantastic. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Terry over and out.